Peace be upon you. Dear viewers, in this episode we'll summarize the main themes of the past episodes on the innate evidence for the existence of Allah Almighty in the Journey of Certainty series, and respond to some objections from viewers on these episodes. We explained that there is an innate nature instilled in all humans, and detailed some of its components, such as religiosity, mental axioms, moral tendency, sense of purpose, and free will. We explained how these components indicate the existence of Allah Almighty. We also showed how Islam's position on each of these components is rational and harmonious. On the other hand, atheism faces a dilemma with each of these components, because atheism insists on interpreting everything in existence in a materialistic way that rejects the concept that a creator instilled these innate components. We saw how the atheistic position is characterized by the denial of necessary axioms, contradiction and disharmony, intuitively repulsive conclusions, devaluation of humanity and dignity, discrediting the human mind and emotions. We also showed how atheism, when it tries to escape one dilemma, inevitably falls into another. E.g., if atheism acknowledges the existence of mental axioms, it falls into a contradiction with its materialistic view, while, if atheism remains true to its materialistic view, it must necessarily deny mental axioms. If atheism tries to evade its necessary result of immorality, it falls into a contradiction with its materialistic outlook, while, if atheism wants to remain in harmony with its materialistic outlook, it inevitably leads to intuitively repulsive immorality. Therefore, it does not help an atheist's case to say, I disagree with the immoral statements uttered by some atheists, and I reject their denial of mental axioms, such as causation, because his rejection is a contradiction of his atheism. Still, in many instances we did use phrases such as, atheism has no problem with such and such, or the morals of atheism include, or atheism says, so that nobody can object by saying, not all atheists say this. The viewpoints that we mentioned are the expected result of atheism, even if some atheists do not actually express them. This series also shows how the denial of innate nature leads the atheist to destroy his own slogans, such as, I respect my mind, I am a humane person, and I believe science. In episode 5, we showed how atheism degrades and discredits the mind. In episodes 6, 7, and 8 we showed how atheism demeans man and his moral tendency, while in episodes 5, 10, and 11, we demonstrated how atheism discredits science. To reiterate, atheism demolishes its own slogans. We also showed how atheists don't practice what they preach. They do what they criticize the believers in God for doing. They criticize the believers for believing in the unseen, even though the believers have evidence of that unseen, while atheists believe in an unseen without any evidence, such as their belief in materialistic explanations for innate components. Without any evidence, they ridicule believers for saying, we don't know why, in response to some questions. Although it is a submission based on a rational belief, then they use the same statement, we don't know why, in response to some questions, such as the question on human free will, in direct contradiction to their materialistic atheistic views. Atheists claim that believers in the existence of a creator are deceiving themselves. In fact, it is the atheists who are deceiving themselves. As we clarified in the episode, why are we here? In conclusion, some Muslims have questions and doubts, for which they don't have satisfactory answers, either because they're negligent in the search for answers from the appropriate sources, or because their faith was not built on solid foundations to begin with, or because of a major flaw in their methodology. They don't interpret the ambiguous by referring to the fundamentals, i.e., they don't interpret the unknown particulars in light of major doctrinal fundamentals, which are supported by evidence. Therefore, they remain in anxiety and turmoil. For those people, doubts may accumulate and eventually lead them to deny a creator's existence. In the hope that this would get them out of their predicament, they do not know that their denial of the existence of Allah is the start of a sequential path of denials, which leads to contradictions and nihilism. The atheistic outlook, which states that the existence of God is an illusion, inevitably leads to the absence of every meaning and value. because its inevitable conclusion is that mental axioms are an illusion, moral values are an illusion, meaning or purpose for existence is an illusion, and free will is an illusion. Rather, the human, with all his spiritual non-materialistic components, which constitute the core of his humanity, is nothing but an illusion. As the atheist, William Provini, professor of history of biology at Cornell University, says, it starts by giving up an active deity. Then it gives up the hope that there's any life after death. And when you give those two up, the rest of it follows fairly easily. You give up the hope that there is an immanent morality. If you believe in evolution, you cannot hope for there being any free will. There's no hope whatsoever of there being any deep meaning in human life. We live, we die, and we're gone. Keep in mind, when you abandoned your religion, announced it to your friends, and celebrated the end of the questions and doubts that plagued you as a Muslim, keep in mind that you entered a deep, turbulent ocean of doubts, questions, and contradictions. You left the most trustworthy handhold to fall into a bottomless abyss. You cannot escape this truth except by turning a blind eye. Now, dear viewers, let's answer some of the objections to the episodes thus far. First, I mentioned some verses of the Noble Quran throughout the episodes. Some said that an atheist shouldn't be addressed with the Quran. To begin with, this series is not only addressed to atheists and skeptics, but also to the believers to solidify their faith, as explained. Nevertheless, even when addressing atheists, we shouldn't be criticized for citing these verses. If I had said, "Oh atheist, Allah says such and such, so you must submit because Allah says so," then the criticism would be valid, because atheists do not recognize the existence of a creator in the first place. However, the verses are in the context of explaining the harmony in the Islamic system and the consistency between what Islam ascribes to Allah and reality, as opposed to the contradictions in atheism. Harmony is evidence for truth, and contradiction is evidence for falsehood. If it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction. Quran translated meaning 4 hours, 82 minutes. More importantly, we should not say that an atheist should never be addressed with the Quran. Rather, many of the verses contain logical evidence for addressing atheists. As Allah Almighty says, were they created by nothing, or were they themselves the creators? Quran translated meaning 52:35. We reason with atheists using the rational argument in this verse, not because this testimony is in the Quran. We did not say, "Oh atheist, the Quran says that Allah exists, so you have to believe that Allah exists." We didn't say that. Second objection, some said, you have deduced the existence of Allah. But Allah is the name of God in the Islamic perspective, whereas the extent of your arguments is to prove the existence of a creator. Your claim that you have proven the existence of the Islamic God, according to the objector, is a jump to an arbitrary conclusion that exceeds the verified evidence. The answer to this objection is that the episodes demonstrate both the existence of a creator who oversees this universe and some of his attributes that manifest in his creation. Only Islam gives the correct perception of the attributes of the overseer creator. In the altered books, such as the current holy book, the creator is described inappropriately, such as the story that he wrestled with Jacob until Jacob almost beat him, or that he rested after creating the heavens and the earth, etc. Such descriptions are inconsistent with the divine attributes of ability and wisdom, which we discussed in this series. In episode 6, for example, we mentioned that the existence of a creator with attributes of absolute perfection provides the foundation for the existence of immaterial values such as goodness and truth, and establishes an absolute basis for morals. Therefore, the evidence does, in fact, indicate that when you prove the existence of a creator, he must be the creator in the Islamic concept, with attributes befitting his ability, knowledge, wisdom, and mercy, all of which necessitate his divinity and make him worthy of worship. So, I did not exceed the verified evidence or jump to conclusions by mentioning Allah. Third objection, some said, you establish the validity of Islam on the invalidity of atheism, even though the invalidity of atheism does not necessarily mean the validity of Islam. In truth, I never made such a claim in the previous episodes. I did not establish the validity of Islam on the invalidity of atheism. The previous 13 episodes are only the beginning of this series, which will extend, Allah willing, and what we've discussed thus far is only the innate evidence for the existence of Allah, with some other benefits here and there. Innate evidence is only one part of the evidence for Allah's existence. As for the other evidence for the validity of Islam, such as the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, Islamic legislation, and that the Quran is the word of Allah, all this has not been discussed yet. Fourth, some people objected to listing some terms and quotes in English. In fact, this was deliberate for several reasons, such as establishing the credibility of some quotes, as some Darwinian and atheistic quotes are shocking and unbelievable, which may lead some to think that the original text must be different, and that we either misquoted or committed a translation error. So, we quoted the text in its original language for better authentication. Sometimes, we even list the English reference to make it easy for the viewer to look it up for verification and further research if desired, especially since many of the cited references aren't translated. Sometimes, we provide English terms when there are no familiar Arabic translations in the scientific community. We list the terms in their original language so that the viewer can get the full meaning. Fifth objection, on the so-called Darwin's theory. I only discussed one specific aspect, which is the moral consequences of Darwinian evolution and the theory's explanation for innate components and some behaviors. Yet, some thought that I was discussing the theory itself, started defending it, trying to prove its validity, while expecting me to respond. Here I'd like to point out that my methodology in this series is identification, accuracy, and organization into different topics. Thus far, I haven't discussed Darwinian evolution itself. Rather, the theory's scientific discussion in detail will come, Allah willing, after discussing the rational evidence for the existence of Allah Almighty. This was the conclusion of the innate evidence for the existence of Allah. We will next move to the rational evidence, with its many useful and convincing arguments and answers, Allah willing. Stay tuned. Peace and mercy of Allah be upon you.